The complete works of Swami Vivekananda JnanaYoga, Chapter 11b. The Cosmos, the Microcosm, Part 1. The human mind naturally wants to get outside, to peer out of the body, as it were, through the channels of the organs. The eye must see, the ear must hear, the senses must sense the external world, and naturally the beauties and sublimities of nature captivate the attention of man first. The first questions that arose in the human soul were about the external world. The solution of the mystery was asked of the sky, of the stars, of the heavenly bodies, of the earth, of the rivers, of the mountains, of the ocean, and in all ancient religions we find traces of how the groping human mind at first caught at everything external. There was a river god, a sky god, a cloud god, a rain god, everything external, all of which we now call the powers of nature, being metamorphosed, transfigured into wills, into gods, into heavenly messengers. As the question went deeper and deeper, these external manifestations failed to satisfy the human mind. And finally, the energy turned inward, and the question was asked of man's own soul. From the macrocosm, the question was reflected back to the microcosm. From the external world, the question was reflected to the internal. From analyzing the external nature, man is led to analyze the internal. This questioning of the internal man comes with a higher state of civilization, with a deeper insight into nature, and with a higher state of growth. The subject of discussion this afternoon is the internal man. No question is so near and so dear to a man's heart as that of the internal man. How many millions of times in how many countries has this question been asked? Sages and kings, rich and poor, saints and sinners, every man, every woman, all have from time to time asked this question. Is there nothing permanent in this evanescent human life? Is there nothing, they have asked, which does not die away when this body dies? Is there not something living when this frame crumbles into dust? Is there not something which survives the fire which burns the body into ashes? And if so, what is its destiny? Where does it go? Whence did it come? These questions have been asked again and again, and so long as this creation lasts, so long as there are human brains to think, this question will have to be asked. Yet it is not that the answer did not come. Each time the answer came, and as time rolls, the answer will gain strength more and more. The question was answered once and for all, thousands of years ago, and through all subsequent time it is being restated, re-illustrated, made clearer to our intellect. What we have to do, therefore, is to make a restatement of the answer. We do not pretend to throw any new light on all those absorbing problems, but only to put before you the ancient truth in the language of modern times, to speak the thoughts of the ancients in the language of the moderns, to speak the thoughts of the philosophers in the language of the people, to speak the thoughts of the angels in the language of man, to speak the thoughts of God in the language of poor humanity, so that man will understand them, for the same divine essence from which the ideas emanated is ever present in man, and therefore he can always understand them. I am looking at you. How many things are necessary for this vision? First, the eyes. For if I am perfect in every other way and yet have no eyes, I shall not be able to see you. Secondly, the real organ of vision. For the eyes are not the organs, but they are the instruments of vision. And behind them is the real organ, the nerve center in the brain. If that center be injured, a man may have the clearest pair of eyes, yet he will not be able to see anything. So it is necessary that this center or the real organ be there. Thus, with all our other senses, the external ear is but the instrument for carrying the vibration of sound inward to the center. Yet, that is not sufficient. Suppose in your library you are intently reading a book and the clock strikes, yet you do not hear it. The sound is there, the pulsations in the air are there, the ear and the center are also there. And these vibrations have been carried through the ear to the center, and yet you do not hear it. What is wanting? The mind is not there. Thus we see that the third thing necessary is that the mind must be there. First, the external instruments, then the organ to which this external instrument will carry the sensation, and lastly, the organ itself must be joined to the mind. When the mind is not joined to the organ and the ear may take the impression, and yet we shall not be conscious of it. The mind too is only the carrier. It has to carry the sensation still forward and present it to the intellect. The intellect is the determining faculty and decides upon what is brought to it. Still, this is not sufficient. The intellect must carry it forward and present the whole thing before the ruler in the body, the human soul, the king on the throne. Before him this is presented, and then from him comes the order, what to do or what not to do. And the order goes down in the same sequence to the intellect, to the mind, to the organs, and the organs convey it to the instruments, and the perception is complete. The instruments are in the external body, the gross body of man, but the mind and the intellect are not. They are in what is called in Hindu philosophy the finer body, and what in Christian theology you read as spiritual body of man, finer, very much finer than the body, and yet not the soul. This soul is beyond them all. The external body perishes in a few years. Any simple cause may disturb and destroy it. The final body is not so easily perishable. Yet it sometimes degenerates and at other times becomes strong. We see how in the old man the mind loses its strength, how when the body is vigorous, the mind becomes vigorous, how various medicines and drugs affect it, how everything external acts on it, and how it reacts on the external world. Just as the body has its progress and decadence, so also the mind, and therefore the mind is not the soul, because the soul can neither decay nor degenerate. How can we know that? And how can we know that there is something behind this mind? Because knowledge which is self-illuminating and the basis of intelligence cannot belong to dull dead matter. Never was there seen any gross matter which had intelligence as its own essence. No dull or dead matter can illuminate itself. It is intelligence that illuminates all matter. This whole is there only through the intelligence, because as a whole, its existence would be unknown unless some intelligence built it. This body is not self-illuminous. If it were, it would be so in a dead man also. Neither can the mind nor the spiritual body be self-luminous. They are not of essence of they are not of the essence of intelligence. That which is self-illuminous cannot decay. The luminosity of that which shines through a borrowed light comes and goes. But that which is light itself, what can make that come and go, flourish and decay? We see that the moon waxes and wanes because it shines through the borrowed light of the sun. If a lump of iron is put in a fire and made red hot, it glows and shines, but its lights will perish because it is borrowed. So also decadence is possible only in that of that light which is borrowed and is not of its own essence. Now we see that the body, the external shape, has no light as its own essence. It is not self-illuminous and cannot know itself, neither can the mind. Why not? Because the mind waxes and wanes, because it is vigorous at one time and weak at another, because it can be acted upon by anything and everything. Therefore, the light which shines through the mind is not its own. Whose is it then? It must belong to that which has its own essence, and as such can never decay or die, never become stronger or weaker. It is self-luminous. It is luminosity itself. It cannot be said that the soul knows, it is knowledge. It cannot be said that the soul has existence, but it is existence. It cannot be said that the soul is happy. It is happiness itself. That which is happy has borrowed its happiness. That which has knowledge has received its knowledge. And that which has relative existence has only a reflected existence. Wherever there are qualities, these qualities have been reflected upon the substance, but the soul has not knowledge, existence, and blessedness as its qualities. They are the essence of the soul. Again, it may be asked, why shall we take the soul for granted? Why shall we admit that the soul has knowledge, blessedness, existence as its essence, and has not borrowed them? It may be argued, why not say that the soul's luminosity, the soul's blessedness, the soul's knowledge are borrowed in the same way as the luminosity of the body is borrowed from the mind? The fallacy of arguing in this way will be that there will be no limit. From whom were these borrowed? If we say that from some other source, the same question will be asked again. So at last we'll have to come to one who is self-luminous. To make matters short then, the logical way is to stop where we can get self-luminosity and proceed no further. We see then that this human being is composed first of this external covering, the body, second, the finer body consisting of the mind, intellect and egoism. Behind them is the real self of man. We have seen that all the qualities and powers of the gross body are borrowed from the mind, and the mind, the finer body, borrows its powers and luminosity from the soul standing behind. A great many questions now arise about the nature of this soul. If the existence of the soul is drawn from the argument that it is self-luminous, that knowledge, existence, blessedness are its essence, it naturally follows that this soul cannot have been created. A self-luminous existence, independent of any other existence, could never have been the outcome of anything. It always existed. There was never a time when it did not exist, because if the soul did not exist, where was time? Time is in the soul. It is when the soul reflects its powers on the mind and the mind thinks that time comes. When there was no soul, certainly there was no thought, and without thought, there was no time. How can the soul, therefore, be said to be existing in time when time itself exists in the soul? It has neither birth nor death, but it is passing through all the various stages. It is manifesting slowly and gradually from the lower to the higher, and so on. It is expressing its own grandeur, working through the mind of the body, and through the body it is grasping the external world and understanding it. It takes up a body and uses it. And when the body has failed and is used up, it takes another body, and so on it goes. Here comes a very interesting question, the question which has been generally known as the reincarnation of the soul. Sometimes people get frightened at the idea, and superstition is so strong that thinking men even believe that they are the outcome of nothing, and then with the grandest logic they try to deduce the theory that although they have come out from zero, they will be eternal even afterwards. Those that come out of zero will certainly have to go back to zero. Neither you nor I nor anyone present has come out of zero, nor will go back to zero. We have been existing eternally and will exist, and there is no power under the sun or above the sun which can undo your or my existence or send us back to zero. Now, this idea of reincarnation is not only not a frightening idea, but it is most essential for the moral well-being of the human race. It is the only logical conclusion that thoughtful men can arrive at. If you are going to exist in eternity hereafter, it must be that you have existed throughout eternity in the past. It cannot be otherwise. I will try to answer a few objections that generally brought against this theory. Although many of you will think that they are very silly objections, still we will have to answer them, for sometimes we find that the most thoughtful men are ready to advance the silliest ideas. Well has it been said that there never was an idea so absurd that it did not find philosophers to defend it. The first objection is, why do we not remember our past? Do we remember all our past in this life? How many of you remember what you did when you were babies? None of you remember your early childhood. And if upon memory depends upon your existence, then this argument proves that you did not exist as babies, because you do not remember your babyhood. It is simply unmitigated nonsense to say that our existence depends upon our remembering it. Why should we remember the past? The brain is gone, broken into pieces, and a new brain has been manufactured. What has come to this brain is the resultant, the sum total of the impressions acquired in our past, which with the mind has come to inhabit the new body.